Welcome back to the Unity Code, where we explore consciousness, energy, and the subtle frequencies that connect us all. I am your host, Nicole Pope, and today we are unpacking one of the most iconic phrases of the season. Oh my gosh, I forgot to turn on my dead bell. We need the dead bell for this one, everybody. And for those of you that don't know, that little ding is my dead bell. I have officially named him, by the way. His name is Ernesto, after Ernesto de la Cruz. For those of you that know the Disney movie Coco, you know. For those of you that don't know, Google Coco and Ernesto, and it will all make sense to you. So Ernesto is my dead bell. He is going to be representing spirit coming through in this beautiful session here today as we talk about the thinning of the veil. That's right. We are going to talk about why the veil is seemingly thinner this time of year. And so you've probably heard it around Halloween, Samhain, Dia de los Muertos, this idea that intuition sharpens, dreams are more vivid, and the messages from spirit are easier to receive. But what does that really mean? Is it because of Earth's natural cycles? Is it cultural traditions? Or is it something energetic that happens beneath it all? And so today I want to explore all of these things, the origins, the science, the energy, and of course I'm going to give you my own take along with some ways that you can experience it for yourself this season. So let's take a deep breath, settle in, and explore the thinning of the veil. So let's talk about where this begins. This idea of a thinner veil goes way back over 2,000 years to the ancient Celts and the festival of Samhain. Samhain marked the end of the harvest season and the beginning of winter, and it was that liminal time when the days were shorter, the nights were longer, and the natural world began to retreat inward. For our ancestors, the shift wasn't just physical with the seasons, it was actually energetic. So they believed that during this changing of the seasons, the boundary between the living and the spirit world became more permeable. And it was a time to receive guidance from ancestors to honor the dead and to protect the living through ritual and intention. So what did they do? They lit bonfires for purification and protection. They wore masks and costumes, not just for fun, but to confuse wandering spirits or to embody archetypal power. And they prepared food offerings and altars inviting benevolent spirits to commune with the living. And while that sounds mystical, it was also very practical for them because these rituals provided a focus, a way for communities to align their attention towards something beyond themselves. And what Spirit is making me aware of as I'm talking about this, it wasn't just these offerings, it was also this idea of protection for the long winter months ahead and making sure that they were divinely guided and protected to have enough food, to have enough water, to have enough sustenance, that's the word, that allowed them to endure the harsh winter months. And so the Celts weren't alone in this idea of the thinning of the veil because across the world, other cultures have echoed this same awareness. So in Mexico, a whole ocean away, right before the Eastern world was aware of the Western world, in Mexico, they celebrated Dia de los Muertos when families created these colorful altars, thank you, Spirit, filled with marigolds, candles, and food that welcomed ancestors home. In Japan, there was a festival that used lanterns to guide ancestral spirits back from the other side. In China, there was also this Hungry Ghost Festival. I totally want to go to this, that honors restless spirits through offerings of incense and meals. Across continents and centuries, one truth repeats itself. Transitional times, whether that's moments between seasons, light and dark, are naturally recognized as more open and energetically alive. Here is an interesting point. While the Northern Hemisphere, which is all of the countries we've mentioned so far, moves into autumn during October, what happens in the Southern Hemisphere is actually the exact opposite. They are moving into springtime. So what happens there? Countries like Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, October means days getting longer and blossoming trees and rising temperatures. So people might still celebrate Halloween there culturally with costumes and parties and maybe even ancestor altars, but energetically, their environment is expressing growth rather than retreat. And because of that, many energy practitioners in the Southern Hemisphere will notice that their own experiences of the veil may differ. And some might feel that heightened intuitive connection in October, but more typically in the Southern Hemisphere, they're going to feel that around April and May when their own autumn arrives and the natural world begins its inward turn. And so, depending on where you live, the thinning of the veil is going to align with different times of the year. If you are in the northern hemisphere, it is going to align with the October timeframe. And if you are in the southern hemisphere, it's going to align to the April-May timeframe. And that is mainly because the season of autumn, of fall, is experienced differently at different times of the year, but that is consistent across cultures in the northern and southern hemispheres of this planet, is that when we shift from summer to winter, when we shift from lightness to darkness, and when our nights become longer and our days become shorter, we consistently across the globe culturally feel like there is a thinning of the veil and the spirit world is a little more accessible. This leads us, thank you, Spirit, to my next question is, what is happening scientifically that makes us feel like the veil is thinner? And so let's talk about the science behind perception. And the goal here, again, isn't to replace this mystical experience and make you realize that this is all hooey, right? It really is to understand the mechanisms behind the thinning of the veil and what happens that support this theory. Because science and spirit often describe the same truths, but through different languages. So first up, I want to talk about circadian rhythms and the brain chemistry, because as days shorten, our bodies produce more melatonin. And this is the hormone that encourages rest and dreaming. And so if we talk about our brainwave patterns, there are three that I want to talk about here today. So we have beta waves. So that happens when you are actively working. That's what keeps us alert. We have alpha waves, which invite clarity, calm, creativity. And then we have theta waves, which open a doorway to imagination, intuition, and connection. And so alpha and theta waves tend to happen more when we connect with spirit, and theta waves particularly are kind of that edge of being awake and being asleep. And so as we're producing more melatonin, as we're encouraging within our bodies more rest and reflection and dreaming, as the brain slows and draws us inwards, it is naturally priming us to connect more with these alpha waves with these theta waves of intuition and reflection. So again, those seasonal quiet and the darker evenings really train our brain to move towards these more relaxed states of consciousness, and where we are subtly a little more aware and accessible of the spirit world. Take a kind of a different spin on these brainwave and the melatonin conversation I just had and talk more about the environmental and behavior changes that happen this time of year as well. So the physical world around us plays such a huge role in how we perceive subtle energy, because thank you, Spirit, as autumn settles in, the natural world starts to quiet, right? The trees shed what no longer serves them. Animals prepare to migrate or hibernate, and the air starts to get cooler. The light softens, and everything just starts to move a little bit slower. And without realizing it, we as humans mirror this rhythm. Our bodies start to respond to the cooler air and longer nights by conserving energy. Our brains, again, are producing more melatonin. Our schedules naturally contract, giving us more moments of stillness. And in that stillness, that slowing of sensory overload, our perception sharpens. So you may feel the world again instead of just thinking about it. So psychologically, this creates space for intuition to surface. And spiritually, this makes us more receptive to subtle communication, the dreams, the signs, the sensations that might have gone unnoticed during the rush of the summer. And even behaviorally, new podcast, same old stumbling over my words. Look, I stumbled over the word stumble. We seek comfort and reflection. We want warm drinks, dim lights, right? Quiet conversations, the pull of journaling or introspection. And it's not coincidence, it's entrainment, because your body, your mind, and your spirit are all aligning to the energetic tempo of the earth itself. So when we say the veil feels thinner, it's not necessarily that something new is appearing. It's that we finally slow down enough to notice what's already been there. Stillness creates perception. And so this season, this natural pause in the rhythm of life invites us to tune in and listen. Culturally, centuries of rituals have trained us to notice the thinning of the veil this time of year. energetically and scientifically and environmentally, we know that we are setting ourselves up and mirroring ourselves for the natural slowness that happens in the environment this time of year, allowing us to create more space, more time to go inward and open up our perception and our brainwaves to be more receptive to what is happening on the other side of the veil. Now, if I take a step back and I want to give you my perspective on this as a metaphysical practitioner, and I'm going to invite in my guides, my loved ones, my angels, what is interesting to me is that this time of year is no different than any other time of year. And there might be metaphysical practitioners that disagree with me. I am here for this because this is a community and I want to hear any disagreements or other opinions on this. But I can tell you that energetically, I don't feel my guides any stronger, any closer than I did any other time of year. Right? When I'm tapped into spirit, I'm always tapped into spirit. The veil doesn't have to be thin for me to do so. And so the veil, the thinning of the veil has no impact on my ability to communicate with spirit. It doesn't depend on a calendar. It depends on awareness. But what is interesting to me is how the idea of the thinning of the veil creates the intention of the thinning of the veil, and it creates the intention of being able to communicate more easily to your departed loved ones, to your spirit guides, to your team on the other side. And that intention, that collective intention, makes all the fucking difference. And when I talk about this, fall gives us collective permission to feel like our loved ones are closer. And because we're setting the intention to feel like they're closer, they are closer. It is easier for people to begin talking to ancestors, lighting candles, visiting cemeteries, telling stories, right? Because when millions of hearts are turning inward and trying to connect across the veil at the same time, that energy amplifies and we are able to connect more easier because the collective intention is there to do so. And so it's not the veil that changes, it is our perception and intention that allows us to connect better together. And so you don't need to analyze the physics of all of this to work. It's through awareness and intention that makes this possible. So I want everyone to think about the science is there to support it, but what actually happens when we open our heart to receptivity is it allows it to happen more easily, more available, and collectively within all of us. Isn't that fucking amazing? It's all through intention, everybody. And so with that, I wanted to give you some ideas of what you can use this thin veil for to help transform your life a little bit. And we are going to do an experiment on this in the coming days. But I do want to tell you that if you want to explore the thinning veil, you can do so by, number one, tracking your dreams. Before you go to bed, set a quick intention or writing a little note under your pillow that says, show me guidance tonight in my dreams. And then when you wake up, record anything that you experienced in your dream, any words, any colors, and emotions, and pay attention in the world around you for any additional subtle messages that you receive related to your dreams. You can light a candle for your ancestors, right? In a nice quiet space, invite a loved one in, light a candle, ask them for ancestral wisdom. Sit with that energy, sit in the quiet, open yourself up to receiving guidance from your ancestors. Notice any sensations that pop up, any memories that pop up, any thoughts that pop up that don't feel like your own. And then over the course of the day, recognize and observe any signs that come to you, any songs, any thoughts, any feelings, any emotions. And notice again the pattern of your ancestors' guidance in what you need to do, what steps you need to take. And overall, I'm just going to say, keep a little notebook or journal of your intuitive hits, right? Slow down and pay attention to the signs, the synchronicities, the numbers, the phrases, the symbols, the coincidences, and write them down. And again, meaning always reveals itself in patterns with this work. Spirit doesn't come in with one giant download of all of the info. Well, they do, but it's very rare. One giant download of all of the information at one time, soup to nuts, so you can understand everything in its completion. And that's not how this works. It comes in puzzle pieces that you have to fit together. So writing down your synchronicities, your intuitive hits in a journal and noticing the patterns is going to be the best way for you to receive those little bits of information that your team sends you, one breadcrumb at a time. And so this really closes the second episode of the Unity Code. And I want to thank you for exploring this beautiful thinning of the veil topic with me today, because the veil is not a doorway that opens once a year. It's a living, responsive field of connection. So whether you interpret it through science or spirit or both, the message is the same, because connection is always available. The season simply makes more of us aware of it. And so take a breath, set an intention, and see what shows up in your world. You don't have to understand it for it to work. Being open and setting the intention of receiving is enough. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and stay attuned to the subtle codes that connect us all.